The lost alien. The sky above the barren planet was an unsettling shade of gray. The bitter wind blew through the desolate landscape, stirring the dust that swirled like ghosts in the air. No life was visible, just the faint hum of the wreckage that lay half-buried in the sand. It was a strange alien world, a place untouched by human hands, and to most, it was a place of fear and uncertainty. But for one lone figure, this harsh planet had become her only hope for survival. Her name was Ile. She was far from home, far from everything she knew. Her once bright and shining ship, a sleek vessel from a distant galaxy, now lay in pieces around her, scattered across the rocky ground. The crash had been violent, and she was lucky to have survived. But luck had a way of running out when one was alone on an unfamiliar planet. Ilia's breathing was shallow as she stumbled through the wreckage, her violet eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of life. She had been here for hours, maybe longer. Time felt irrelevant in this desolate place. She had tried to communicate with her ship's systems, but the damage was too severe. The ship was gone, and with it, her connection to the rest of the universe. Her skin, the pale silver of her people, glowed faintly under the strange sky. Her slender body was covered in a tattered suit of armor, torn from the crash and the struggles that had followed. Her once strong legs were bruised and battered, but still, she walked on, determined to find some way out of this nightmare. Her only hope was to survive long enough to find someone, or something, that could help her. But that was easier said than done. Ilia's people, the Azura, were not exactly known for their friendliness with other species. They were a warrior race, fierce and proud, and to most of the galaxy, they were feared. But despite the strength she carried within her, the reality of being stranded alone was slowly sinking in. She had never felt so small, so helpless. As she walked, she stumbled across a small rock outcrop and collapsed onto the ground. Her head spun, and her heart pounded in her chest. She could barely hold herself together, but the thought of giving up never crossed her mind. Ilia wasn't someone who would simply lay down and die. She was a survivor. But no one was coming. The distant mountains loomed like silent sentinels, and the quiet was deafening. No sounds of life, no movements in the distance, nothing. She had been so sure that help would come. Maybe someone would find her ship, or maybe she would make it to a nearby settlement. But after hours of walking, that hope was beginning to fade. As Ilia sat there, her thoughts drifted to her home, to the shining cities of her people, to her family. The Azura had always been strong, united, and proud, but even they had enemies. Even they had wars they couldn't win. She was no stranger to conflict, but the endless silence of this place made her feel as though all of that was far behind her, forgotten, as if the universe had simply moved on. She stood up again, her knees weak but still willing to carry her. There had to be someone out there, right? She had to believe that. It was the only thing that kept her moving. The hope that there was someone, anyone, who could help her. Her heart sank as she noticed something in the distance, a flicker, a faint light that seemed to pulse in the gloom. She couldn't tell what it was, but it was there, just out of reach, and too far to make out clearly. She stared at it, willing herself to focus. Was it a rescue signal, or just the reflection of the planet's strange atmosphere? But as she began to move toward it, she hesitated. What if it was a trap? What if it was something far worse than the loneliness she already faced? No, she couldn't stop now. She had to try. With her resolve steeled, Ilia pushed forward. She staggered through the sand, her feet dragging with each step. But the light remained distant, flickering like a star she could never reach. Was it just a mirage? A trick of the planet's strange atmosphere? She didn't know. All she knew was that she had to keep moving. The wind picked up again, howling through the barren landscape, carrying with it the scent of something she couldn't identify. Her senses, usually sharp, felt dulled by the exhaustion and isolation. As she trudged on, she caught a glimpse of movement. shadows that flickered across the ground, too quick to be real, yet unmistakable in their presence. Ilya froze, her hand instinctively going to the weapon at her side. Her heart raced as she scanned the surroundings, her eyes searching for the source of the movement. But there was nothing, just the emptiness. Her breath was caught in her throat. Had she imagined it? Or was something, or someone, watching her from the shadows? The air felt thick with tension, and for the first time since the crash, Ilya felt truly afraid. She wasn't alone anymore. But who, or what, was out there? Would it help her, or would it turn out to be yet another danger lurking in the vast unknown? She didn't know, but the sense of being watched was undeniable. The silence of the planet pressed in around her, and she knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The dangerous humans. The night fell like a dark shroud over the barren planet, the gray sky turning to a deeper shade of black. The stars twinkled faintly in the distance, like tiny pinpricks of light in a sea of emptiness. On the ground below, a group of figures emerged from the shadows. Humans, their faces obscured by the helmets of their high-tech armor. They moved with purpose, their boots crushing the rocky terrain beneath them as they made their way toward the wreckage. These were not ordinary humans. They were the most feared mercenaries in the galaxy, known for their ruthless tactics and their willingness to do whatever it took to get the job done. The dangerous humans, as they were called, had earned their reputation through countless brutal missions across countless worlds. They were hired guns, trained to hunt down targets, no matter who or what they were. At the head of the group was Captain Cade. Tall, broad-shouldered, and unyielding, Cade was the epitome of a soldier, a man who had seen it all and done even more. His face was lined with the scars of countless battles, his eyes cold and calculating. He was a man who believed in one thing: survival. And he had done whatever it took to ensure that his survival, and the survival of his crew, was never in question. But as he looked out over the wreckage of the alien ship, something stirred deep within him. It wasn't fear. He had long ago stopped feeling fear, but something else, something that made him uneasy. The mission was clear: capture the alien girl, bring her back to their employers, and claim the hefty reward. But there was something about this job that didn't sit right with him. "You sure this is the right place?" one of his men, Lieutenant Harris, asked, breaking the silence. He was a young soldier, eager to prove himself, but there was a noticeable edge of doubt in his voice. Cade glanced back at him, his piercing gaze locking onto Harris. "We have our orders. The alien girl is here. We find her, and we bring her back. End of story." Harris nodded, but the unease lingered. The alien girl was no ordinary being. Cade knew that much. She was a member of the Azura, an alien race known for their strength and power. The Azura had long been enemies of humanity, and to many, they were little more than a myth, figures of fear in the dark corners of the galaxy. But this girl, this lost Azura, had somehow ended up here, stranded on a backwater planet with no way to communicate with her people. As Cade surveyed the wreckage, a thought gnawed at him. What if they were wrong about the Azura? What if there was more to this story than just capturing her for a paycheck? "Stay sharp," Cade ordered, his voice low and steady. "We don't know what we're walking into." The team moved forward, scanning the wreckage with their advanced sensors. The ship had crashed hard, but there was little sign of its occupants. No bodies, no blood, just debris scattered across the rocky terrain. It was as if whatever had happened here had occurred quickly, leaving little trace. For a moment, Cade's thoughts turned inward. He couldn't help but wonder if this mission was something more than just a simple job. He had seen countless alien species in his time, but none like the Azura. They were known for their ruthlessness in battle, but also for their isolation. They had never made contact with humans directly, at least, not until now. This could be humanity's first real interaction with them, and Cade wasn't sure if he was ready for what that might mean. "Captain," another soldier, Sergeant Juno, called out from the far side of the wreckage. Her voice was urgent, but controlled. "You need to see this." Cade's heart skipped a beat. He motioned for his team to follow, and they made their way toward Juno. When they arrived, she was kneeling beside a small object half buried in the sand. It was a communication device, a small, sleek piece of technology that hummed faintly with energy. Cade knelt beside it, examining the device with a careful eye. It was clearly of alien design, though the markings on it were unfamiliar. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was no ordinary capture mission anymore. The presence of the device meant something else, something far more significant. "Is this a signal?" Juno asked, her voice barely a whisper. Cade didn't answer immediately. He took a deep breath and tapped a few buttons on the device. A holographic display flickered to life, revealing a map of the surrounding area, with a blinking red dot marking a specific location. It was a signal, a distress call. "Someone's out there," Cade murmured. "And it's not just the girl." His mind raced. The Azura didn't make mistakes. If they were calling for help, it meant something serious had happened. Something that the galaxy had never seen before. The implications were staggering, but there was no time to dwell on it now. He stood up, turning to his team. "We're not just here to capture an alien. We're here to find out what's really going on. Move out. We've got a rescue mission." The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances, but followed orders without hesitation. The mission had changed, but Cade's resolve hadn't wavered. He wasn't just hunting down a lost alien anymore. He was about to uncover a secret that could change everything. As the team began to march forward, the night seemed to grow darker, the air thicker with tension. Cade couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something far greater than they could possibly understand. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized that, just maybe, this mission would change him as well. The first encounter. The wind howled across the barren landscape as Cade and his team made their way deeper into the desolate terrain. The atmosphere felt heavy with the unknown, as though the planet itself was watching them, waiting for something to happen. The blinking red dot on the map had led them to a small ravine, hidden away from the view of any potential observers. The path was treacherous, with jagged rocks and unstable ground underfoot. Still, the team pushed on, determined to uncover the truth behind the distress signal. Cade's mind raced as he thought about what lay ahead. They had no idea what they were truly walking into. Everything about the mission had been based on assumptions. There was no telling what kind of alien technology or creatures they might encounter. But one thing was certain. The alien girl they had been sent to capture wasn't the only mystery waiting to be unraveled here. Something bigger, something more dangerous, was unfolding before their eyes. "Stay alert," Cade ordered, his voice calm but firm. "This could be a trap. We don't know what's waiting for us." The team nodded in agreement, their faces hidden behind helmets, their bodies tense and ready for action. Cade led the way, scanning every rock and crevice for signs of movement. It was then that he noticed something strange, a faint, flickering light coming from deep within the ravine. It was unlike anything he had seen before. "Over there," Cade pointed. "Let's move." Carefully, they advanced toward the source of the light, the hairs on the back of Cade's neck standing on end. The closer they got, the more apparent it became that the light wasn't just a reflection from the planet's surface. It was something else, something active. The light pulsed with a rhythmic pattern, almost like a heartbeat. Cade signaled for the team to stop. They crouched low behind a large boulder, their eyes trained on the glowing source. As they watched, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was her, the alien girl. Her form was unlike anything Cade had ever seen before. She stood about 6 feet tall, her body thin but muscular, with a graceful yet fierce posture. Her skin shimmered a pale silver, and her long dark hair cascaded down her back in waves, seemingly unaffected by the wind that blew through the ravine. Her eyes glowed a bright violet, casting an eerie light in the dark surroundings. She looked almost ethereal, as if she didn't quite belong to this world. But it wasn't her appearance that made Cade's heart race. It was the aura around her. There was something powerful about her, something that made the air feel charged with energy. This wasn't just any lost alien. She radiated a presence, one that was both mesmerizing and dangerous. Cade watched her for a moment, his thoughts a whirlwind. He knew he had to act quickly. His orders were clear: capture her, bring her back. But standing there, watching her, he hesitated. The girl didn't seem to notice them, her focus entirely on the flickering light in front of her. She was connected to it somehow, as if it was calling to her. "Captain." Sergeant Juno's voice broke through Cade's thoughts. "What's the plan?" Cade hesitated, his eyes still fixed on the girl. "We need to approach carefully. She's not alone, and we don't know what kind of defense systems she might have." But as he spoke, something changed. The girl's eyes suddenly snapped to attention, her head turning sharply in their direction. Cade's heart skipped a beat. She had sensed them. For a moment, the world seemed to freeze. The girl's violet eyes locked onto Cade's, and for the first time since the mission began, he felt a wave of uncertainty. He wasn't sure if it was fear or awe, but something about the look she gave him was unnerving. Then, without warning, she moved. Fast. Too fast. In an instant, the alien girl dashed toward them, her body a blur of motion. Cade's reflexes kicked in, and he raised his weapon, but before he could react, the girl was upon them. The air around her seemed to vibrate with power as her hands glowed with an energy that could only be described as otherworldly. "Take cover," Cade shouted, diving behind a rock just as the girl unleashed a wave of energy from her palms. The force of the blast sent rocks flying, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. The team scattered, each soldier diving behind different pieces of cover as the alien girl continued to fire blasts of energy in every direction. Her movements were fluid and controlled, her eyes never leaving Cade's team. She wasn't just defending herself, she was hunting them. Cade's mind raced. She was powerful, far more than he had anticipated. This wasn't the lost, weak alien they had expected. She was a warrior, and she was ready to fight. "Move, move, move," Cade barked, signaling his team to regroup. They had to get her under control before things escalated further. But just as quickly as the girl had attacked, she stopped. She hovered in place for a moment, as if sensing the tension in the air, before lowering her hands. The glowing energy that had surrounded her faded, leaving only the faint pulse of her violet eyes. Cade slowly rose from behind the rock, his weapon still aimed at her. But now, the standoff felt different. The girl wasn't attacking anymore, though the intensity in her eyes told him she was ready to defend herself at a moment's notice. The silence that followed was suffocating. Cade's heart pounded in his chest. He couldn't understand what was happening. Why had she stopped? Was she waiting for something? Then, with a voice that seemed to echo in the stillness, the alien girl spoke. "Why are you here?" Her voice was clear, but there was an unmistakable undertone of challenge in it. Her accent was unfamiliar, but the words were unmistakable. Cade took a deep breath, his mind racing. The moment of truth had arrived. Was he to capture her as he had been ordered? Or had the mission shifted yet again? What was he dealing with? "We're here to help," Cade said, his voice steady, though a part of him knew that the truth might not be enough. The girl didn't flinch. "Help." She raised an eyebrow, her eyes glowing with suspicion. Cade didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing for sure. This was no ordinary mission. This alien girl, whoever she was about to change everything. A deal with the devil. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a pale light over the alien landscape as Cade stood facing the girl. His heart still raced from the earlier encounter, but now, as the tension began to subside, an eerie calm seemed to settle over them both. The girl's violet eyes never left his, unwavering in their intensity. The air was thick with unspoken words, a silence that was almost as dangerous as the energy she had unleashed moments ago. Cade knew one thing for certain now. This mission was not what he had signed up for. There was no capture and deliver. There was something deeper at play here, something that went beyond just following orders for a paycheck. The girl, despite being a member of the feared Azura race, was not just an alien target. She was a person, and in her gaze, Cade saw not the menace his superiors had warned him about, but something else. Fear, perhaps. Loneliness. Cade hesitated. His team was waiting, ready to carry out the original plan. But he couldn't shake the feeling that they had missed something important. That the girl, lost on this strange planet, was not just some helpless victim. They were dealing with a being of power, a survivor. And despite her abilities, she was alone. "I'm not here to hurt you," Cade said, his voice steady but low. "I understand why you're scared. We've only just met, and I get it. But if you don't trust us, it's going to get worse. More people will come, worse people." The girl didn't move. Her eyes flickered to the soldiers behind Cade, their weapons still trained on her, ready to strike if necessary. But she didn't flinch. Instead, she cocked her head slightly, studying Cade as if trying to decipher the truth in his words. "You are not like the others," she said finally, her voice softer now, but still carrying an edge of suspicion. "You do not act like the mercenaries who hunt me." Cade felt a weight in his chest, the realization dawning on him. She wasn't just wary of them because they were humans. She feared what they represented, an unstoppable force, sent to bring her back for reasons unknown. She had already been hunted once, probably more than once. That made her dangerous, but it also made her a survivor. And Cade, for reasons he couldn't explain, found that quality in her compelling. "You're right," he replied, lowering his weapon just slightly, trying to show her he meant no harm. "We're not mercenaries, at least, not in the way you think." The girl studied him for a long moment, her gaze narrowing, as if she were weighing his words against some internal judgment. She didn't speak again for several long seconds, and Cade could see the wheels turning in her mind. She was calculating, but also searching for something in him, or perhaps in all of them. "I have no reason to trust you," she said, her voice firm once more. "But perhaps it is better to work with you than against you." Cade felt a surge of hope, tempered by the reality of the situation. "What are you asking for?" She glanced over at the glowing object in her hand, the communication device, still active, still pulsing softly. "I need this. It is my only chance to contact my people. If I can send a signal, I may be able to get help. Without it, I am alone." The desperation in her voice, though subtle, was unmistakable. Cade could see it, the raw edge of fear buried beneath the pride of a warrior. She didn't want to rely on anyone, least of all humans. But she had no choice. The silence of the planet had kept her isolated long enough. Her people, the Azura, were far from forgiving, and without a way to contact them, the girl would be left at the mercy of anyone who found her first. Cade paused, considering his options. They could still capture her, as originally planned, but the girl's need for help had become clear. And in that moment, Cade knew this was not just about completing a mission. This was something else, something personal. He couldn't just turn his back on her. "I'll help you," he said, his voice steady but serious. "I'll get you the signal, but we need a deal." Her eyes flashed, a spark of distrust in them, but she didn't back down. "A deal?" Cade nodded. "You and your people have been at war with humanity for a long time. But right now, we're allies, whether we like it or not. If we get you the signal, if we help you, you need to promise me something in return." She raised an eyebrow, intrigued but cautious. "And what would that be?" "If anyone comes for you, anyone who wants you dead or captured, you'll allow us to help. We won't leave you behind." For the first time since they met, the girl looked almost vulnerable. She hesitated, the weight of her decision pressing down on her. Then, slowly, she lowered her weapon and extended her hand. "I accept your deal," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But know this, human. The Azura are not easily swayed. And if this is some kind of trap, if you betray me..." Cade felt the weight of her warning, but he didn't flinch. He didn't need to hear her threat to know that there was no going back now. Whatever happened next, they were in this together. "I won't betray you," Cade said quietly, his hand meeting hers. "We all have our reasons. Let's just make sure this doesn't end with more enemies than we started with." For a long moment, neither of them moved, the silence thick with understanding. It was a fragile alliance, one built on necessity, not trust. But in the vast, dangerous galaxy they both called home, it was the best chance they had. And as the team began to set up equipment to help her send the signal, Cade couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something far larger than he could have ever anticipated, something that could change the fate of both humanity and the Azura forever. Betrayal. The ravine was quiet again, the wind barely stirring the dust, as Cade's team worked to set up the equipment. The alien girl, now identified as Elia, stood a short distance away, watching them intently. Her posture was tense, her violet eyes never leaving Cade or his men. There was an air of uncertainty between them all, despite the deal they had struck. It wasn't trust. It was a fragile understanding, held together by the need to survive. Cade had always been a pragmatist. He'd seen betrayal before, felt the sting of it in his own soul more times than he cared to count. And yet, as he worked alongside his team to make sure Elia could send her signal, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. There was a shadow in the back of his mind that he couldn't quite place. Maybe it was just the weight of the mission, or maybe it was the quietness of the situation, the stillness that seemed to hang over them like a storm cloud waiting to break. But the doubt kept gnawing at him. "Captain." Lieutenant Harris's voice pulled Cade out of his thoughts. The young soldier's face was shadowed by the edge of his helmet, but Cade could hear the tension in his tone. "What is it?" Cade turned to face him, sensing the unease in his voice. Harris lowered his voice, glancing over at Elia, who was now sitting on a large rock, her head tilted as if listening to the faint hum of the equipment. "Something doesn't feel right. We're putting all this effort into helping her. And for what? She could be leading us into a trap, or worse." Cade's jaw tightened. He had expected Harris's doubt. The boy had always been eager to prove himself, but there was a thin line between being cautious and being paranoid. Cade had lived long enough to know that nothing was ever as simple as it seemed. "She's not like the others, Harris," Cade said quietly, keeping his voice low so the others couldn't hear. "She's desperate, and we're the only ones who can help her." Harris didn't seem convinced. "You trust her too easily. You don't know what she's capable of." "I know she's alone," Cade responded, his gaze flickering briefly to Elia. "And I know she's not a monster. We need to focus on getting her that signal. After that, we'll figure out what to do next." Harris wasn't satisfied, but he nodded, stepping back to continue working on the equipment. Cade sighed, rubbing his temples. This wasn't just about the mission anymore. It was about something deeper, something that Cade couldn't fully articulate yet, but he knew it was there, lurking beneath the surface. As the team finished setting up the signal equipment, Cade glanced over at Elia again. She was still sitting on the rock, watching them carefully. The suspicion in her eyes hadn't faded. It wouldn't be easy to gain her trust, and Cade wasn't sure if he was ready to give her his own. But just as Cade was about to approach her, a sharp metallic sound rang out. A signal cutting through the stillness. Cade froze, his heart skipping a beat. It wasn't the device they had just activated. It was something else, something urgent. The noise echoed again, and then a voice crackled through the comms. "Captain Cade, this is Sergeant Juno. We have a problem." Cade's blood ran cold. "What's going on, Juno?" "There's a ship. It's not human. It's closing in on our position. Fast." The words hit Cade like a punch to the gut. His hand instinctively went to his sidearm, but his mind was already racing, calculating the possible outcomes. This was no coincidence. Someone had tracked them. Someone had followed them here. How long do we have? Cade's voice was sharp, his military instincts kicking in. 10 minutes at most, Juno responded. It's big, Captain. They're coming for her. Cade's thoughts spun. Elia. The signal. It had worked. She had reached out. And now someone dangerous, was coming. But who? And why? Without hesitation, Cade snapped into action. Get to defensive positions. Prepare for contact. Harris, Juno, take the west flank. The rest of you, cover the east. We don't know who's coming, but we're not letting them take her. His team scattered, moving swiftly to secure the area. But as Cade turned toward Elia, he felt a sinking feeling in his chest. She hadn't moved. She hadn't even flinched when the alert came through. He approached her slowly, his voice calm but urgent. We need to go. Now. Elia looked up at him, her eyes glowing with a strange intensity. For a moment, Cade thought she might argue or worse, run. But instead, she simply stood, her body poised, as if ready to face whatever was coming. I knew this would happen, she said, her voice quiet but firm. I knew the signal would draw them in. I just didn't know it would be so soon. Cade's heart raced. Who's coming, Elia? What do they want with you? Elia didn't answer immediately. She stepped toward the signal equipment, her fingers brushing lightly over the controls. They are the Azura, my people. Cade's stomach dropped. The Azura. The race that had been humanity's greatest enemy for centuries. They were coming for her. Are you telling me they're going to kill you? Cade asked, a mix of disbelief and concern creeping into his voice. Elia's eyes flashed, her gaze filled with something Cade couldn't quite understand. No, they are coming to retrieve me. And if they find me here, it will be worse than death. Before Cade could respond, there was a flash of light from the sky. The ship, the alien ship, had arrived, its massive silhouette blotting out the stars above. Cade's pulse quickened as the enormity of the situation set in. The Azura had come to collect her, and now they were going to make sure she didn't escape. But something inside Cade stirred. This was no longer just about a mission. This was personal. He wasn't going to let them take her. Not after everything they had been through. But before Cade could issue any further orders, a voice called out from behind him. You don't have to worry about them, Captain. Cade spun around. The voice wasn't from his team. It wasn't from the Azura. It was from Lieutenant Harris. Harris stood there, his rifle raised, a cold look in his eyes. And in that moment, Cade understood the betrayal. Harris wasn't concerned about the mission. He wasn't even loyal to the team. Harris had made his choice, and now he was going to betray them all. The final stand. The moment of betrayal hit Cade like a blow to the chest. He didn't have time to process the full weight of it before Harris leveled his weapon at him, the barrel cold and steady. The young soldier's eyes were devoid of the hesitation Cade had once seen in him. Only cold determination remained. Stand down, Captain, Harris said, his voice calm, almost too calm. We've been ordered to bring her in. Alive or dead doesn't matter. You've been compromised. All of you have. Cade's pulse raced, his instincts telling him to move, to act, but his body remained frozen for a split second, too stunned by the sudden turn of events. Betrayal from within the ranks. He'd seen it before, but never so close, never from one of his own. Harris wasn't just a soldier. He was part of the team, a friend, or so Cade had thought. Behind Harris, the rest of the team stood in uneasy silence, their weapons raised but their postures uncertain. Some of them, Cade could see, still had doubt in their eyes, as if they weren't sure who to follow. He could feel their uncertainty like a tangible thing. Harris's grip on the situation wasn't as firm as he thought. But then Cade's mind clicked into action, the soldier inside him snapping into focus. The situation was dire, but it wasn't lost yet. Not if he could act fast. "You're wrong, Harris," Cade said, his voice steady despite the tension tightening in his chest. "This isn't about orders anymore. It's about survival. Both ours and hers." The words seemed to hit a nerve. Harris's grip tightened on his weapon, but he didn't pull the trigger. Cade could see the inner struggle flickering in Harris's eyes. The mission, the money, the loyalty, all of it was swirling inside him. And it was only a matter of time before he made his final choice. Ilya, standing quietly at the center of it all, watched the exchange with an unreadable expression. She hadn't moved. She hadn't shown fear. But there was something in her eyes now, something Cade couldn't place. The tension in the air grew thicker, a stillness that felt like the calm before the storm. The distant hum of the Azura ship overhead grew louder, closer. Cade made his move. His hand shot out, grabbing Harris's rifle and twisting it down before the soldier could react. But Harris wasn't unprepared. He pulled back, aiming at Cade's chest with a speed Cade hadn't expected. The shot rang out. Everything happened in an instant. Cade's body instinctively dropped, narrowly missing the blast. The shot collided with the rock behind him, sending debris flying in every direction. He scrambled to his feet, his hands reaching for the sidearm holstered at his waist. He couldn't waste time. The moment of hesitation had passed, and now they were all in danger. Cade, his team, and Ilya. Harris wasn't just a threat. He was the key to everything unraveling. The Azura ship was already overhead, preparing to descend. "Ilya, get down," Cade shouted, but she was already moving. She darted to the side, taking cover behind a large boulder as the firefight began in earnest. The team was torn. Some of them fired at Harris, others at the ship above them. The air was filled with the sound of gunfire, the crack of energy blasts, and the screech of incoming enemy fire from the hovering Azura ship. Cade barely registered the chaos around him. His focus was solely on Harris, on the traitor who was slowly turning their world upside down. Cade was fast, faster than he had ever been in his life. He dove to the ground, rolling behind another rock to shield himself from the incoming fire. He heard the roar of the Azura ship above as it activated its weapons, sending energy blasts down toward the surface. The ground shook as explosions ripped through the area, throwing soldiers off their feet and sending dust and debris into the air. "Captain," Sergeant Juno's voice cut through the chaos. "We need to fall back. We can't win this fight." Cade didn't reply. He didn't need to. He knew they couldn't win this fight. Not against the Azura, not with Harris now on the other side. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but Cade wasn't about to let his men, or Ilya, fall to whatever fate Harris had planned for them. He scanned the battlefield, his eyes locking onto Harris's position. The young soldier was moving toward the wreckage of their equipment, his rifle trained on Cade, his movements sharp and deliberate. "Harris," Cade shouted, his voice carrying over the sound of the battle. "You can't do this. This isn't who you are." But Harris didn't respond. He was too far gone. Cade could see it now. This wasn't about duty anymore. This wasn't about survival. Harris had been swayed by something darker, perhaps the promise of power, perhaps fear. But Cade didn't have time to figure it out. Harris was a threat, and Cade had to eliminate it. The Azura ship fired again, this time at their position. Cade dove to the side, rolling behind cover just as the explosion rocked the ground. His head spun as the blast sent him crashing into the dirt. Blood trickled from his forehead, but he didn't have time to stop and assess the damage. Ilya, surprisingly agile, was already on the move. She sprinted toward the wreckage of the signal equipment, her eyes focused and determined. Cade realized then that she wasn't just running for cover. She was running toward something, toward her own fate. "Ilya!" "No," Cade shouted, but it was too late. She had already reached the equipment, her fingers flying over the controls with an urgency Cade couldn't comprehend. He moved toward her, his legs weak but fueled by the need to protect. As he reached her, a new voice cut through the comms, a booming voice, rich with authority and power. "This is Commander Ilrix of the Azura. We have found her. Surrender now, and you will be spared. Resist, and you will all be destroyed." Cade's breath caught in his throat. The Azura were no longer a shadow on the horizon. They were here, and they weren't backing down. But Elia's fingers didn't falter on the equipment. She looked up at Cade, a strange, almost sad smile on her face. "Let them come," she said quietly. "I am not the one they seek anymore." Before Cade could respond, the ground shook once more as the Azura ship descended. There was no more time for second chances. The final stand had begun, and they were all in the crosshairs. But Cade wasn't going to surrender. Not today. Not while there was still a chance to survive. The battle was far from over. A new beginning. The roar of the Azura ship's engines thundered overhead, filling the air with a chilling sense of finality. The ground trembled beneath Cade's feet as the massive vessel settled onto the surface, its sleek, black hull reflecting the dim light of the moon. It was a show of power, a force that could obliterate them all in a heartbeat. The Azura had arrived in full force, and there was no escape now. But despite the overwhelming odds, Cade refused to back down. His mind raced as he surveyed the battlefield, trying to make sense of their options. The Azura were relentless, but he had seen something in Elia, something that made him believe they could win. She wasn't just a helpless alien stranded on a hostile planet. She was a warrior, a survivor, and more importantly, she wasn't alone anymore. Cade turned toward her as she stood by the wreckage, her gaze fixed on the ship descending from the sky. Her expression was calm, her body poised, as if she had already accepted what was about to happen. Cade felt a pang in his chest, a mixture of admiration and regret. This wasn't the life she had chosen, but it was the life she had been given. And now, it was his fight too. "Elia," Cade called, moving toward her. "We can't fight them all. We need to make a choice. We can't win this head-on." She didn't turn to look at him immediately. Instead, she stood there, silent, her fingers tracing the edge of the signal equipment she had used to reach her people. It was broken now, half destroyed by the fire and chaos of the battle, but her focus remained steady. She had made her decision. "I know," she said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had already accepted the inevitable. "We won't win this battle, Captain. Not here. Not now." Cade's heart sank. He had hoped for a different answer, for some last-minute miracle that could turn the tide. But reality was setting in. The Azura were too powerful, and his team, his men, were already stretched too thin. "What do we do now?" Cade asked, his voice softer this time. His earlier bravado was gone, replaced by a sense of uncertainty. He had never faced a force like this, but he wasn't ready to give up just yet. Elia's gaze finally met his, and in that moment, Cade saw something that shocked him. Hope. It wasn't the kind of hope born from wishful thinking, but the kind that comes from survival, from having to fight when there is no other choice. "We don't fight them head-on," she said, her voice gaining strength. "But we can still survive. You just need to trust me." Cade looked into her eyes, searching for something to hold on to, something to believe in. He had followed his orders his whole life, but now he was on the verge of breaking that code. And yet, as he stood there, the last shred of his doubts melted away. He had trusted his instincts before, and they had never steered him wrong. Elia was not just an alien. She was a survivor, and together, they had a chance. "What are you thinking?" Cade asked, his voice steady, though the weight of what he was about to agree to hung heavily between them. Elia didn't hesitate. "We take the fight to them. Not with brute force, but with what we have left. I can use the ship's communication system to send one last signal. Not for help, but to make them believe that I'm giving in. I'll offer myself to them." Cade frowned, instinctively stepping closer. "No, you can't. It's the only way," she interrupted, her voice unwavering. "If I surrender, they'll believe they've won. They'll drop their guard. And when they do, that's when we strike. We take out their communications, their control systems, their ships. We'll make sure they can't reach the rest of the Azura fleet. Cade's mind raced as he processed her words. It was a risky plan, a desperate move, but it was also the only chance they had. The Azura would be watching her closely, expecting her to comply, expecting her to fall in line. And while they were distracted, Cade and the rest of his team would make their move. "You're not going to do it alone," Cade said firmly, his jaw set. "I'm with you. We all are." Elia looked at him for a moment, as if weighing his sincerity. Then, slowly, a faint smile tugged at her lips, a rare sight that caught Cade off guard. "You're brave," she said, the first hint of softness in her voice. "I can see why they sent you to do this. But there's one thing you don't understand, Captain." "What's that?" Cade asked, his gaze narrowing. "You're not just fighting for me. You're fighting for something much bigger. The Azura will never stop hunting me. They'll keep coming. But with you, with your team, we have a chance to do more than survive. We can change the way things are between your people and mine." Cade felt a stirring in his chest. The weight of the mission, the weight of the betrayal, the weight of everything he had done up until this point. It all felt like it had led to this moment. This was no longer about a single mission or a single person. This was about something far bigger. A chance for redemption, for change. "I'm ready," Cade said quietly, more to himself than to her. "Let's do it. Together." The final stand had begun. But it wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about fighting for something they had both lost. Trust. Hope. A future. As the Azura ship hovered above them, its enormous form blocking out the stars, Elia and Cade shared a silent understanding. They had one shot, and they weren't going to let it slip away. Elia stepped toward the wreckage, her fingers deftly moving across the control panel, activating the communication system once again. The words she spoke were soft, but filled with purpose. She wasn't just offering herself to the Azura. She was playing her part in a larger game, a game that, if they succeeded, would change the course of history for both their people. Cade and his team moved quickly, coordinating their final steps. They set charges on key components of the Azura ship, preparing for the moment when the signal would go out and their chance to strike would come. And then, as the Azura ship's engines powered up, ready to descend, Cade knew there was no turning back. Elia had made the first move. Now, it was their turn. The battle for survival had become the battle for a new beginning. And it was just getting started.